Hey there, viewers. Just when you thought this case couldn't get any darker, a new voice has stepped forward from behind bars. R. Kelly has now revealed what really went on between him and Diddy in prison, and what he shared is disturbing, unexpected, and raising serious questions. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The cell next door was always quiet. I didn't want to talk about it. Not then, not now. But some things, they don't stay quiet forever. Not even in a place like that. Not even in the SHU. That's the special housing unit for folks that never been behind the wall. It's the part of MDC Brooklyn where they keep the ones who can't mix with others. Too dangerous, too high profile, or too broken to move with the general population. That's where I was working when it all happened. Me, just a janitor. Deshaun Blevins. Nothing special. I worked nights, mostly. I liked the quiet. Didn't mind the smell, the flickering lights, or the busted vending machine in the staff lounge that only gave you root beer no matter what you pressed. I did my job. I cleaned up what needed cleaning. I minded my own. For 18 years. That's how I survived in that place, by not asking questions. But some nights, questions came looking for me. The day they brought Diddy in, I remember, because all the guards were acting weird. Not nervous exactly, just careful. Like they'd rehearsed it. They moved in formation like a dance, quiet boots and coded nods. Didn't announce him like they do the usuals, no shackles clanking, no yelling. Just a black hood, 2 red gloves carried by a medic, and a plastic tub full of sealed evidence bags marked Personal Michael, 37,452-54. That was his inmate number. I memorized it. Couldn't help it. Something about it felt too clean, like it had already been printed before he got assigned. His cell was 3C, right side of the corridor. Lights always a little dimmer on that stretch. Don't ask me why. The air smelled stale, like old wires and ammonia. I'd cleaned that cell the night before, bleached the floor, scraped dried something off the wall, and mopped a sticky patch that smelled faintly like aftershave. The next night, it smelled like nothing. Like the air had been wiped too. 2 days later, they moved another inmate in next door. 3B. I didn't know who at first. The paperwork just said temporary transfer session witness. It wasn't until I caught the voice, singing low and sad, that I knew it was him, R. Kelly. He didn't sing like he meant to. It was like humming through pain, and only late at night. Like he forgot where he was and the notes just fell out of him. They never spoke. Not once. I swear on my mama's grave, I never saw them talk. Never heard them say each other's names, but something passed between those walls. Not words, not knocks. Something else. Something like static. You ever been in a room where you feel like the air got weight? Like someone's watching even when the hall's empty? That whole wing started to feel like that after they were both in. Cleaning orders started coming in doubled. Cell 3C needed daily sterilizing even though no one went in or out. Red gloves kept showing up in the laundry bin, only used for biohazard cleanup, and there was no record of an incident. The cameras flickered. I started logging weird timestamps on the system. 12:06 a.m. Every night, like clockwork. A soft noise too, almost like a cassette clicking into place. Not from the cameras though, from the walls. I tried to stay out of it, really I did, but one night, I think it was February, it got to me. I was doing my usual rounds. The halls were quiet. Diddy hadn't requested any food trays for 3 days, and Kelly had been moved to isolation twice that week after collapsing during exercise checks. They said he had vertigo, but I'd seen the report. He told medical staff he saw blinking shadows and felt like his eyes weren't syncing with the room. Anyway, I was mopping near 3C and noticed the vent cover on the wall was loose. Just a little. It must have shifted, maybe from vibrations or old screws. Curiosity got the best of me, I admit. I popped it open with my scraper, thinking maybe a rat or someone stuffed something in there. Instead, I found a small scrap of paper. No folds, just resting against the metal mesh like it had been left for someone to find. It said, "Session 2 complete." No name, no signature, no context, just those 3 words in shaky handwriting, like someone wrote it while trying to keep their hand steady in a storm. I held onto it for weeks, still have it, kept it between the pages of my maintenance manual, right next to the inspection log from that night. I showed it to no one. I didn't want them asking why I was looking inside vents between 2 of the most high-profile inmates the Bureau's ever held. You don't stick your nose in things like that at MDC Brooklyn. Not unless you want to disappear into some administrative reassignment. But I knew something wasn't right. Kelly started getting sicker. His eyes looked fogged over, like someone had dimmed his insides. He wouldn't eat unless the tray came from the same cart Diddy's came from. He'd knock once when it arrived, then tap twice after taking a bite. I watched him through the reflection of my mop bucket once. He wasn't eating, just staring at the wall, listening, waiting, like he thought someone would answer. No static sometimes, too, coming from the vents. Not the usual hum of the building's guts. This was different. Jagged, like someone playing an old radio inside a blender. It would build slow and then cut, sharp, like a scream that never fully forms. Other janitors said nothing. The guards said less. Everyone just kept moving like the hallway didn't feel heavier each night. But it did. It got worse. One night I found a sketchbook. In the shoe, inmates ain't allowed unsupervised materials like that. Not since the camera incident back in 19. But there it was, sitting in Kelly's toilet bowl. Not wet, just resting on top like someone placed it down gently and forgot to flush. I pulled it out with my gloves. The cover was blank. Inside, dozens of pencil sketches. Some of them were of the hallway, perfectly detailed, down to the flicker in the second light over cell 3C. Others were portraits, unfinished faces, red gloves, a man holding a microphone with no mouth drawn in. Then, toward the back, there were full-page spreads of something I still can't explain. People in courtrooms, drawn from behind, all of them facing forward toward a judge who wasn't there. In one, the courtroom was empty, except for 2 men in cells drawn into the walls. I turned the last page. There, scribbled in rushed lines, was Diddy's cell, 3C, but the door was gone. The wall was open like a stage, and standing behind it was R. Kelly, watching. Not in chains, just watching. I left the sketchbook in the janitor's closet and filed my last official cleaning request the next morning. After that, I went on medical leave, claimed my back was acting up. Truth is, I couldn't go back there. Not after what I saw. Not after how the place started to feel like it was rehearsing something. Like those 2 men weren't locked up. They were practicing for something the rest of us weren't meant to see. So when you ask me why I'm talking now, it ain't 'cause I want trouble. It's 'cause silence don't protect you the way you think. Not when you've already been written into someone else's playback. Wait, is that the tape? Well, go ahead, play it. I've never heard it before. That voice, that's him. That's Kelly. He's saying, "Field." He didn't threaten me. He wrote me into the playback. I told you, they never talked. Not with words. Chapter 2. They were both on the roster, but never together. I've read thousands of transfer orders. Enough that I could probably recite the form fields in my sleep. Date, inmate number, facility code, cell assignment, reason for relocation. It's always the same rhythm. Legal, sterile, consistent. It has to be, because if the paper doesn't match the people, the whole system falls apart. At least, that's what I used to think. My name doesn't matter. I'm just an internal coordinator in the DOJ's Corrections Logistics Division. Most people don't even know my department exists. We handle internal movement requests between federal institutions, interagency transit, even short-term mental health transfers. I've seen high-risk mobsters moved under fake names and cartel witnesses rerouted mid-transport. None of it ever stuck with me. Until the file flagged Combs, Sean 37452-54 hit my system. It started as a routine audit. DOJ wanted a full internal trace on Combs's incarceration timeline after inconsistencies were flagged by the Oversight Subcommittee. My supervisor handed me the case personally. I remember the way she said it. Don't assume malice, just check for clerical drift. Clerical drift. That's a fancy way of saying someone typed the wrong date or assigned the wrong cell by accident. I've caught those before. Happens more often than you'd think. But this wasn't that. The first thing that struck me was how clean Combs's SHU intake was. Too clean. Every step was time-stamped within seconds of the next. Booking, medical clearance, psych eval, cell assignment. Usually those things get staggered. Delays in personnel, slow system logins, guard overlap. But Combs' file read like someone had rehearsed it. He was placed in 3C. That part matches what I later found in the maintenance logs. But the real problem started when I pulled the next page. Because right beneath Combs' entry, in a record dated 3 days later, was an unsealed, unsigned transfer log for Robert Kelly. It listed him as being temporarily housed in the same SHU unit, Cell 3B, and the number of rooms in that unit was the same, 1013. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, a duplicate form maybe, left open from an older transfer. But the cell block charts showed otherwise. For exactly 10 hours, both men were assigned cells beside each other. Not weeks, just one night and part of the following morning. Then Kelly was marked, moved to temp medical, and Combs remained unflagged. Now, here's where it gets strange. When I tried to verify Kelly's transport memo from that week, the entire document was redacted, even the headers. I'd never seen that before. Not for internal transfers, not even for WITSEC-level inmates. The only thing left readable on the form was one typed phrase at the bottom, in smaller font than standard. Session witness. No context, no definition. I ran a search through the DOJ's clearance classification tables. That phrase doesn't exist. It's not a real status, not in transport, not in interrogation, not anywhere. So I dug further. I started backtracking Kelly's logs. The day before that phrase appears, his medical chart notes light sensitivity, dizziness, and a complaint that someone's breathing is matching mine through the wall. I double-checked the cell layouts. 3B and 3C share one ventilation shaft. Old design, left over from the ADS before federal codes changed. Most units had them sealed off. SHU didn't. I checked housing rosters. According to the warden's logs, Kelly and Combs were never officially on the same tier. One of them had to be wrong, but both were signed by different captains, each on separate days. I ran handwriting verification. Both were legitimate signatures. Both documents were digitally time-stamped using the same clearance badge. That's when I stopped assuming it was a mistake. I tried looking into who else was assigned to that wing that week. The inmate roster was mostly redacted, not unusual for high-profile protective custody units, but 5 names had been removed completely, not redacted, removed, scrubbed like they were never there. The file index skipped them entirely. I pulled the original paper archives, found a list from facilities control. On the back of the sheet, written by hand in pencil, was a sentence that chilled me. Choir rehearsal moved to Tier 3. No context, no author, just that. I paused. My stomach had started to turn. I'd seen enough cases where bureaucratic sloppiness buried the truth. But this felt different. This felt constructed, precise, as if someone had created 2 realities that overlapped just long enough to pass something between them. Something neither one was allowed to speak out loud. There was also an envelope marked with Kelly's name, originally submitted for outgoing legal mail. It was sealed, dated, and marked urgent private leak communication, but it had never left the facility. I found it in the internal mail archive, tucked inside a box labeled confiscated-audio content. But it wasn't a cassette. It wasn't a CD. It was just a handwritten letter. I wasn't supposed to read it, but by then I'd already broken that rule 10 different ways. The letter was short. Barely 2 sentences. I was supposed to testify, but he sang it for me. I just mouthed the words. No signature, no date, but the handwriting matched the complaint Kelly filed to medical earlier that same week, the one about the breathing. I opened Combs' file again, scanned for anything that could make sense of this. On page 41 of 88, tucked between psych eval and visitor logs, was a media evidence manifest. I almost missed it. The file referenced a court document, unrelated to any known hearing, labeled Playback 5 square format. There was no explanation of what it contained, just a comment in the notes section that read, "Material included as rehearsal baseline. No testimony required. Witness already present." Already present. I started sweating. I think I knew then what I was looking at, or at least what I didn't want to admit. These 2 men, they weren't just inmates. They were components, parts in something that had been scheduled, arranged, and filed like a performance. A bureaucratic show where silence wasn't absence. It was the message. I checked one last file, the original intake form for Combs, not the digital version, the actual paper document. Most of it was normal. Identifiers, blood type, emergency contact section, blank. Except it wasn't. At the bottom, below the line, someone had scrawled in black ink, "Chore Boy 2 has arrived." I didn't move for 5 minutes, just sat there, reading it again and again. The pen pressure was uneven, like the person wrote it while glancing over their shoulder. I made a photocopy and stored it in my private folder. The rest, I filed where it belonged, into a cabinet labeled "Temporary Hold Non-Disclosable." They were both on the roster, but never together, until someone wanted them to be. Chapter 3, the Playback Choir. I wasn't supposed to work in the chapel. That job was reserved for girls with longer sentences, the ones the officers figured would behave if they had something soft to hold on to. But in spring of 2023, Sister Marlene, our regular clerk, got transferred after an incident during night prayers. They never said what the incident was, just boxed up her rosaries, wiped her name off the duty roster, and told the unit counselor they needed a new pair of hands. My name came up, not because I was special, probably just because I didn't cause trouble. I kept quiet, I kept my head down. That's how it always starts in here, being quiet, and before you know it, the quiet starts listening back. The chapel was small, a rectangle of old cinder block painted beige, half the paint peeling like sunburn. Stained glass windows weren't really glass, just faded colored film stuck to the panes. The pews were narrow and warped, full of old initials and scratchings you could never quite scrub out. It was one of the only rooms in MDC without cameras. We weren't allowed to know why, just that it was a sacred exception in the security protocol. My job was to log all sermon requests, clean the hymnals, and keep the altar tidy. Most of it was boring, but then came that night. The one I still don't know how to explain. It was after midnight when they brought them in. 5 men, no guards, no clanking cuffs. They moved like they already knew where to sit, quiet as breath. I was in the back closet, sorting out communion cups. I wasn't meant to be there during private prayers, but no one told me they'd scheduled anything. That was the first thing off. Private prayers were always listed on the unit board. This one wasn't. I peeked out from behind the supply shelf, careful not to creak the door. I saw 4 of them settle in the pews, each one spaced 2 rows apart. One stood at the altar, hands clasped behind his back. The only face I recognized was R. Kelly. He sat in the 3rd pew from the front, head bowed low, not praying, just listening, like his ears were tuned to something no one else could hear. The man at the altar never turned around. He wasn't tall, but he moved with the kind of stillness that made the air wait for him to speak. Except he didn't. No one did, not for the whole hour. Then, as quietly as they came, they left. The next morning, everything was normal again. Almost. When I went to straighten the hymnals, I noticed something strange. Someone had rearranged them, not thrown or scattered, deliberately shifted. I looked closer. The first letter of each spine had been marked in red ink, just small enough to miss unless you were alphabetizing. I pulled them out in order, and the spines read, "You're not the testimony, you're the rehearsal." I put them back and didn't say a word. Over the next few weeks, more things started to shift. Symbols etched deeper into the pews. I used to clean them with a toothbrush and vinegar, but these marks weren't grime. They were fresh carvings. One showed a pair of hands bound with vines, thorns wrapping around the fingers like rosary beads. Another was a microphone, split down the center, leaking something that looked like blood. Another one I still remember too clearly. A choir of mouths, wide open, but no eyes drawn on the faces, just smooth skin where their vision should have been. I started hearing music when I was alone in there, but not real music. It sounded like someone playing 2 audio tracks over each other. One was an old interview, Diddy's voice answering something about inspiration and pain. The other was R. Kelly's voice, but backwards, like someone spliced the tapes. The 2 voices overlapped perfectly, like a duet neither man knew they were singing. I checked every speaker in the room. Nothing was turned on. Then came the cassette. I opened the altar drawer to replace a set of candles and found a single tape sitting on the velvet lining. No case, just the tape, marked with masking tape on one side. Someone had written on it in red marker. In Sketchbook 3. I didn't dare play it, but I carried it with me, slipped it under my mattress like a relic. About a week later, I was organizing prayer boxes. Inmates could leave folded notes or small personal items inside sealed tins under the pews, meant for spiritual reflection or priestly visits. Most were empty, except one, Diddy's. His name wasn't on the outside, but I knew it was his. It had the number 37,452,044 scratched into the lid, and the edges had faint prints from red-gloved hands. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. But curiosity eats at you slow in places like this. It whispers like the air does when the chapel gets too still. Inside the box were 2 things. First, a single red glove, folded neatly, no stains, no wear. It looked almost new. I picked it up carefully, felt the lining. Cold. Too cold. Like it had been kept somewhere else before arriving here. On the inside cuff, someone had written the word rehearsal in tiny block letters. Second, a chord sketch, folded 3 times, soft at the creases, like someone had looked at it too much. I unfolded it and almost dropped it when I saw what it was. It was R. Kelly, sitting in a courtroom, silent. But he wasn't facing the judge. He was facing outward, toward the gallery, toward whoever was watching, toward me. His finger was pointing straight at the sketch pad, at the viewer. I stuffed the drawing back in the box, slammed the lid shut, and locked the cabinet. My hands were shaking. That night, I played the tape. Just once. The sound was distorted. It started with silence, then breath, then the sound of shuffling paper, like courtroom documents being turned. Then came the voices, but not normal speech. It was humming, 5 voices, rising in tone, flattening again, a kind of chant with no language. At one point you can hear Kelly say something very soft, almost swallowed by the tape. I didn't learn the words. He whispered them through the wall. Then the audio cuts out, static, for 13 seconds. Then something else. A click. Then Diddy's voice. Good. Choir Boy 3 remembered his part. That's where it ended. And never told anyone. I folded the tape in paper and flushed it the next morning, piece by piece. The glove. I burned in the trash barrel behind the chapel. I told myself none of it was real. That it was stress, isolation, dreams. That there was no choir, no rehearsal. But sometimes, when the lights flicker and the walls creak, I still hear it. That music that isn't music, the sound of breathing in time. In that sketch, it wasn't a drawing of Kelly anymore. It was a mirror, and I was the one pointing. Chapter 4. The rehearsal was taped. The archive vault never gets warm. It's not freezing, but it stays in that stale, climate-controlled zone where skin never quite settles. That kind of cold that doesn't touch your fingers, just your mood. No windows, no sounds except for the hum of the rack towers and the occasional thermal discharge from the ceiling unit. Most people hate working in here. I didn't mind. I liked it. Out of sight, off the books. No supervisors breathing down my neck. My name's Troy. I'm a civilian contractor for the Bureau, digital forensics side. I don't deal with courtrooms or arrests or news cycles. I deal with media, tapes, drives, corrupted files, stuff that needs to be cleaned up, decrypted, reconstructed, or wiped entirely. Wiping's what I was brought in for this time. They handed me a black case marked 37,452.54, do not extract. That number again. I didn't recognize it at first, just another high-profile dump. My orders were simple. Sort through the drive catalog, delete everything outside the admissible scope for court playback. No backups, no redundancies, just clean and close. The files weren't like usual media evidence, no dates, no names, no metadata. Each one was labeled with weird non-standard strings, just time codes and slashes, like someone was cataloging dreams. The main folder was titled /sessions/playback_root/. Inside, subfolders labeled Session 1 through Session 8, though Session 4 was missing. Session 6 wouldn't open. The rest played fine, if you could call what they showed footage. Static village interviews, whispering, court, bro that flickered in and out of color. Almost like someone had filmed it off a monitor with a shaky hand. I recognized some clips from Diddy's trial, the ones that got leaked on internal channels, but there were others I'd never seen. No official record, no origin point. And then there was the unlabeled file. It didn't even have a name, just this. No extension, no audio, no timestamp, just a dead file sitting in the root directory. I opened it thinking it would error out or crash the system. What it played? It showed a dimly lit prison cell viewed from a high angle, almost like someone had placed the camera in the vent. The image wasn't crystal clear, but the face was unmistakable. R. Kelly, sitting on his cot, staring into the cinder block wall. Still, blank, unblinking. Then his mouth moved. No sound, just movement. Not lip reading, not exactly. His mouth wasn't shaping words in any way I could follow. It was like he was echoing something silently, or rehearsing dialogue from a different scene altogether. The camera panned on its own somehow to the wall. Through the cinder blocks, faint and flickering, another cell appeared. Not behind the wall, inside it. Diddy's cell, except the lighting was wrong. It wasn't prison lighting. It looked like a stage, clean, lit from below, like a theater production being filmed without an audience. Then the footage glitched. The screen turned black for 2 seconds, and when the image returned, it wasn't Kelly anymore. It was me. Me, standing in the middle of Diddy's cell, holding a red glove. Not in prison gear, not in the footage's quality. High resolution, clean angles, lit from the top, like someone had installed a production light directly above me. I jerked away from the monitor and nearly pulled the cord loose. I stared at the screen, heart hammering in my ribs. My hands were empty. I checked, but on screen, I was still holding the glove. And smiling. I terminated the playback, closed the file, checked for its source, but it wasn't listed. There was no file path, like it had never come from the drive at all. I should have stopped there. I didn't. I dug back into session 6, the one that wouldn't open earlier. This time it let me in. /session_6/choi__sync/. That was the folder name. Inside were over 300 video fragments, each only a few seconds long. Most were courtroom angles, jury reactions, pre-trial interviews. But when I laid them out in order, something clicked. The expressions, the gestures, the words spoken off camera. They were exact matches, frame for frame, with testimony R. Kelly had given during his 2021 trial, which should have been impossible. These were Diddy's sessions, his charges, his evidence, different trials, different timelines. But they matched so closely, it was like someone had played Kelly's testimony as a script, and everyone in Diddy's trial had acted it out, unaware. Same camera angles, same sudden glances, same breathless silences at the 12-minute mark. This wasn't coincidence, this was mirroring. Playback wasn't just a recording, it was a role, something someone else could inherit. I ran facial frame analysis on Kelly's posture during his cell footage. The mouth movements synced, not with his own voice, but with clips of Diddy speaking during pre-trial interviews. Every nod, every blink, they aligned. Reversed roles. Reversed voices. I ran a pattern match. The software flagged a 98% probability that Kelly's silent recitations were actually Diddy's words, rearranged. I started to sweat. My fingers shook on the keyboard. I hadn't drunk anything in hours. I looked back at the monitor, and that's when the final file appeared. It wasn't there before, it hadn't been hiding, it hadn't been renamed, it wasn't there. But now it was /private/choiboy_4/. That was my workstation ID, my exact handle linked to my access card. Inside was one file, MP4, labeled Sing Your Part. I clicked it before I could think. Diddy's voice played through my headset. Choir boy for Sing Your Part. Then silence. Then breathing. Then a low harmony, not a song, a tone, like 5 voices humming in sync, just below audible range. And somewhere in the background, beneath it all, I'd Kelly whispering. Depots. Harry didn't teach me to sing, he taught me to echo. That's when the file corrupted. That's when all the lights in the vault flickered. And that's when I realized I hadn't just watched a playback. I'd become part of the rehearsal. Chapter 5. They only touched once. I told myself I'd never say anything. That was the rule. When you're working shoe, you don't report what doesn't exist on paper. If it ain't written, it didn't happen. If it ain't logged, it didn't breathe. That's how you survive in a place like that. Not by force, by silence. But now I'm retired, living off pension and pills in a trailer 2 miles off the state line. No badge, no brothers left on the inside. And something about that night still crawls around in my chest, like a tick that never dropped off. I think it's time someone knew. I worked the overnight shoe rotation at MDC Brooklyn for almost 9 years. People think special housing's the worst block. They're not wrong, but it's not just about the violence. It's the quiet. Too quiet. Like the place is always waiting for something to start. The air in shoe hums different. Walls thinner. Fluorescence louder. You start to hear things in the buzz, like someone whispering behind a locked door that ain't even yours. I remember the night because of the tray. You do the same motions 1,000 times. Slide open the hatch, push the tray through, lock the slot, move on. But this time, something about it felt rehearsed, like both of them knew what was coming before I did. Diddy was in 3C, everyone knew that. We didn't say his name, we said the circle, like he was a place and not a person. He barely spoke, not once in all my shifts, just hummed sometimes, low and slow, not songs exactly, more like a broken tune trying to fix itself in his throat. He'd pace while he did it, dragging his fingers against the wall like he was trying to scratch through. He wrote too, not on paper, on the walls, symbols, circles and slashes, a triangle with an eye in the middle. Once, I swear, he wrote out the words "feed the stats" in what looked like toothpaste, but when I opened the cell later, it was gone. Nothing but clean cinder blocks. R. Kelly was brought in without warning, placed in the 3B for 2 nights. That wasn't protocol. You don't drop a high profile in next to another without layers of approval. But nobody questioned it. We just got a note slid under the duty desk. Temporary housing confirmed, no transfer log required. Kelly was quieter than Diddy, which is saying something. But not in the same way. He didn't pace, he didn't write. He sat on the edge of his bed, murmuring to himself. I thought it was prayer. But the second night I leaned in just close enough to hear the words. They weren't prayers, they were lyrics. Half-formed verses, like he was remembering a song he'd never recorded. Thing is, I knew that melody. I'm a fan of old R&B, always have been. And what he was humming, it wasn't one of his. I'd heard that same melody years ago in an unreleased track Diddy teased during a Revolt TV interview, one that never officially came out. The rhythm matched exactly. But that wasn't the strange part. It was what happened after dinner rounds. I was moving up the block, tray cart rolling, steam rising off the slop they call food. I stopped at 3C like always, slid the tray through, locked the hatch. Diddy didn't even look at me, just kept staring at the wall between his cell and the next. Then I turned to 3B. Kelly was already standing at his slot, not moving, just staring at the food tray I hadn't delivered yet. And then, before I could react, Diddy reached through his food slot with one hand. Just his hand. Holding something. I froze. We don't allow contact between cells, not even eye contact if we can help it. But Diddy just waited, arms steady, fingers pinched around the edge of some object I couldn't see clearly. Kelly stepped forward. No words. He reached out through his own slot, took it with 2 fingers and pulled it in. And that was it. They never looked at each other, never spoke, but the second their hands withdrew, I swear the whole corridor went cold. Like the air stopped moving, like every other cell held its breath. Even the buzz from the light panels overhead felt quieter. I didn't say anything, just locked both slots, pushed the cart to the end of the tier, and turned the hallway lights off an hour early. Told the watch desk we had a short power fluctuation. No one questioned it. That night, an inmate in 3F started banging on his door, screaming that he could hear footsteps above him. He kept yelling, they're coming down, over and over until we had to sedate him. I didn't tell him there was no floor above shoe. Just 3 stories of reinforced concrete and sealed air ducts. After my shift, I couldn't sleep. Couldn't shake the image of that touch. That single pass between 2 monsters the world said weren't supposed to cross paths. Weeks later, I left the job. packed up my locker. But I kept the object. See, the next morning, when I checked Kelly's cell during laundry collection, I found it on the bed. Wrapped in a torn page from a Bible. It was a VHS tape. No markings, no sticker, except for one strip of faded labels stuck crooked along the spine. In red marker, someone had written, "Rehearsal tape, choir boy." I never played it. Didn't have the guts. But I held on to it. Still have it now. Here, you want to see? It's real. You tell me what it means. Because I still don't know what I saw that night. But I know they only touched once. Just once. And it was enough to make the whole hallway forget how to breathe. Chapter 6. The final testimony never happened. I've been drawing courtroom trials for 17 years. I've sketched murderers, senators, mothers who lost everything, and billionaires who tried to buy silence. I've filled hundreds of pages with faces twisted by guilt, confusion, pride, grief. But the one face I can't stop thinking about. I don't remember drawing. His eyes weren't there, just blank sockets, shaded too soft to be horror, too clean to be an error. His mouth was slightly open, like he was about to say something, but the lines faded before they finished the shape. He wasn't in the witness box. He wasn't on trial. He wasn't even listed in the official court schedule that day. But there he was. Kelly, sitting in the center of the courtroom, just watching. That page was sealed before I ever left the building. They paid me in full, gave me the usual NDA paperwork, but one page was pulled from my folder before I zipped up my case. The bailiff didn't say a word, just removed it like he was taking out a piece of trash. I didn't push it. You learn not to ask when it's federal. But I remember the weight of that page. Thicker paper, heavier pencil, pressure lines where the charcoal had dug in too deep. I thought it was gone. And then last week in the courthouse archive room, where I'd been asked to assist with a media request, I found it, tucked between two folders marked Exhibits Withheld Playback Series, the sketchbook I hadn't opened in over a year, my own, but different. The pages weren't in the order I left them. They were folded slightly along the corners, like someone had been thumbing through it over and over. Some of the sketches were smudged, as if a gloved thumb had dragged across Diddy's jawline in one drawing, over Kelly's eye in another. I flipped through, heart racing, and then I saw it. The drawing, the one I never turned in. The courtroom looked different, more like a chapel. The fluorescent lights were dimmer, and the audience wasn't made up of jurors or press or legal staff. They were all wearing red gloves. Every seat, uniform posture, hands folded in their laps like choir boys waiting for the next line of a hymn. And there, in the middle, not standing, not testifying, just watching, was R. Kelly. He looked peaceful, and he was looking directly at me. I swear to you, I do not remember drawing it, but it was in my sketchbook. My shading, my notations along the margin, the little arrows I make when I want to fix proportions, the signature at the bottom. All mine. I started pulling out the older pages. The first few seemed normal. Diddy in handcuffs, his attorney leaning in, the judge with her gavel raised. But then things shifted. In one sketch, Diddy had no mouth, just a smoothed-over oval where his lips should have been. In another, R. Kelly was at the defense table, but he had no eyes. His face was turned to the side, the socket empty like an old statue. Then it got worse. Some of the drawings didn't show people anymore, just shapes. Shadows where the audience should have been. One image had the entire gallery replaced by what looked like mirrors, everywhere. Small ones, round ones, hand mirrors held up by faceless court attendees. In each mirror, something different was reflected. Not the courtroom, just me. My hands, my face, My sketchbook. I flipped faster, the pages blurring like a flipbook cartoon. Then I found it. The one that stopped me cold. It was the courtroom again. Same bench, same lighting, but in the witness chair wasn't Diddy. Wasn't R. Kelly. It was me. Hair pulled back, sketchpad in my lap, looking straight ahead toward the audience, like I was testifying without knowing I was. The caption underneath was in my handwriting. I'd never write captions. You saw the lines, you became the scene. I slammed the book shut and dropped it on the floor. The room echoed, empty, dust shifting in the ceiling light. My heart was hammering, throat dry. I needed to confirm. Maybe I'd had a breakdown. Maybe I'd drawn that during a fever dream and forgotten, but part of me knew better. I've never drawn without knowing it. I pulled up the sealed courtroom footage. The system required dual authentication, but I had the clearance for that day's logs. I cued the playback from the day I thought the sketch was made. Fast forward through the opening statements. The bailiff's call, defense counsel's monotone questions, Diddy sitting still. Then, at 1:43 p.m. exactly, there was a glitch. 3 seconds. The feed stuttered, blinked black, then returned. In that moment, between frames, R. Kelly appeared, sitting beside Diddy's attorney. Not speaking, not moving, just there. And then gone. I rewound, played it again. Same glitch, same flicker. I called up the metadata. There was no recording error. The time code didn't skip. Nothing was flagged. But he was there. 3 seconds of a ghost. I shut down the terminal. My hands were sweating. What if the trial wasn't about testimony? What if it wasn't about who spoke? What if it was about who listened? That thought clung to me the rest of the afternoon. I couldn't draw anymore. Every time I picked up the pencil, my hand started shaking. I left the sketchbook on the table and walked out of the archive room. That night, I couldn't sleep. When I woke up at 3:11 a.m., the sketchbook was back in my bag. I never brought it home. I opened it slowly. New pages. 3 of them. Drawn in my style. Same lines, same shading, but I hadn't made them. I couldn't have. I was asleep. The first showed the courtroom from a new angle, looking from the judge's bench outward, as if the drawing had been made from where power sat. In every seat, red gloves, no faces, just reflections. The second, Diddy and Kelly standing in front of a mirror, but the mirror didn't show them. It showed me, sitting in the gallery, sketching. The third, a blank courtroom, silent, empty, except for one figure in the witness chair. Me. Beneath that final sketch, written in my handwriting, crooked, trembling. At singing, he was sinking. And now, every time I draw, I feel the paper hum under my fingers, like it's waiting. Waiting for the next scene. Waiting for me to rehearse my part. Chapter 7. On Kelly's last statement. I'd only been working at the clinic for 5 months when the file came in, tucked in a plain brown envelope, sealed in triplicate. The kind of thing that smelled like dust, old toner, and somebody's panic. The Georgia office doesn't normally process high-security clemency petitions. Not for federal inmates, not for names like his. But that day, the director slid the file across my desk with no eye contact. Just said, start indexing, no copying, no uploads, and do not discuss contents with the review team unless absolutely necessary. The first thing I noticed was the header. Red ink, not black. Colorative complicity. Choice witness 1. It didn't mention R. Kelly by name, but the identifying number on the cover page matched his BOP record. The document was classified as a non-public clemency annex. That's a designation I'd never seen before. The cover sheet bore a disclaimer that chilled me. This document may not contain truth. It contains permission. What followed wasn't a traditional statement. It read more like a guided monologue, equal parts confession, poem, and rehearsal cue. I remember the first few lines. He didn't need to speak, I already knew my lines. The vent between us carried more than sound. It carried silence that had already been rehearsed. It never said Diddy's name. Not once. But everything, every metaphor, every hollow in the phrasing seemed shaped around him, like the person writing had spent months memorizing another man's rhythm. Further in, the language became stranger. We practiced the silence. They called it freedom. He told me the static would smooth out if I stopped humming. I did, and then I heard the others. There were footnotes, but not normal ones. One was marked simply and linked to a box in the appendix titled Red Room Variants. Inside, carbon copies of handwritten letters, real ink, smudged edges, all supposedly from Kelly's cell. Most were about dreams. Dreams of a room with no ceiling and 4 walls that turned to glass when he spoke. He mentioned microphones that dangled from strings, but none had wires. He described voices in perfect harmony humming under his bed. One line said, "The playback loop isn't audio, it's permission. If you hear it, you're already inside it." The last page of the letter bundle was addressed to no one, but it ended with a message written 3 times, each one shakier than the last. "Don't say his name, just mouth it. That's enough to be written." I paused at that part. Something about it made my throat go dry. Attached to the statement was a small cassette tape, black plastic, no label, just a strip of red electrical tape along the spine. I asked the director if I was cleared to listen. He looked at me too long before nodding. That night, I used the last working cassette player in the office, the kind we keep in the evidence vault for digitization projects. I locked the door behind me and pressed play. At first, nothing. Then breath, breathing. The soft, collective sound of maybe 20 people inhaling, holding it, then releasing it in sync. Then, a whisper. A voice I couldn't place, though something about the cadence crawled under my skin. It said, "And isn't the voice, he's the sync." Then silence again, no music, just ambient courtroom noise, shuffling, paper, someone adjusting in a seat. A cough. Then the tape clicked and stopped. I rewound it, thinking I'd missed something, but it played the same every time. Breath. Whisper. That night, I couldn't sleep. My dreams were strange. I kept seeing a courtroom filled with empty chairs, all of them turned toward the gallery, not the bench. I was standing at the witness stand. No judge, no jury, just red gloves on every seat neatly folded. And every time I tried to speak, I heard myself humming instead. I went back to the statement the next day. Something compelled me to recheck the final page, the petition form, where the inmate signs their name beneath the statement. But the signature line was blank. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes statements came unsigned due to legal strategy or refusal. But something about the clean emptiness of that line made me stare longer than I should have. That's when I saw it. Faint, barely legible, like someone had written it in erased graphite or heat-sensitive ink. My name, typed cleanly in place of the inmates. I jumped up from my desk. My chair clattered to the floor. I flipped through every page of the packet again, hands trembling. Nothing else had changed, just that line. I took the tape and hid it in my desk drawer, locked it, told myself I imagined the name. But then, tonight, just before midnight, my email chimed. One message. No sender, no subject line. But the body read, subject, choir boy, 5, rehearsal confirmed. The screen flickered once and stayed on. Haven't moved since. Because I don't know if I read the statement or if I was part of it. Chapter 8. You weren't watching, you were listening. The screen flickers, then breath. You'd think it's part of the video at first, just ambient sound, courtroom atmosphere, nothing out of place. You can hear the wooden bench creak under someone's weight, the brush of a pen on a legal pad, a throat clearing from the gallery, all the sounds you'd expect in a trial this big, this heavy. But the camera isn't on the judge. It isn't on Diddy, it isn't on R. Kelly. It's on you. You, in the gallery. Or maybe not a gallery, maybe a pew. You can't quite tell anymore, the architecture's blurred at the edges, half courtroom, half chapel. There are mirrors in the corners, angled upward, reflecting the audience rather than the bench. You don't remember seeing mirrors in the courtroom, but they're there now. The screen pans across rows of people, some you recognize, an assistant who once testified, the technician who touched the playback file, the janitor with the voice that shook, each of them frozen mid-breath, their eyes locked on something just out of frame. They don't blink. Their hands are folded in their laps, every one of them wearing red gloves. You try to remember when you first saw this footage. Maybe it was part of the trial coverage. Maybe it was something leaked, but your memory gets slippery when you chase it too hard. You remember sitting at your desk. You remember the file being sent to you by someone whose name you can't find in your inbox anymore. The video keeps looping. Someone begins humming. Soft at first, like it's coming through your speakers, but you realize it's not. It's coming from your own chest. Low, layered hum. You try to stop it, but your breath catches in time with it. Every inhale is matched by someone else on screen, a silent harmony spreading through the footage. Then you hear it, a whisper, threading through the noise like fishing line through water. You saw them both, but you don't remember when. The playback shifts. Now you're watching faces, not the trial, not the lawyers, just the faces of people watching. A courtroom camera turned outward, every audience member shown in sequence, their eyes, their stillness, their sketches. One woman draws feverishly, lips moving in time with a voice that isn't hers. An old man scratches something into his sleeve with his fingernail. A young clerk mouths words under his breath, his pen never touching paper. The screen cuts to a blank notebook. A hand reaches into frame. You recognize the glove. You recognize the writing. It's yours. A note scrawled in the margin. He didn't teach me the lines, he just gave me the silence. You feel the weight of something in your lap, though nothing's there. You look down. For a moment, just one. You see the edge of a sketchbook, but it fades when you blink. The final clip begins. R. Kelly smiling. He's standing. Not shackled. Not on trial. Just there. Center of frame. His eyes don't look at the camera. They look past it. Behind him, Diddy walks by. He doesn't stop. Doesn't look up. Just walks in a slow circle. Like pacing a stage before the lights go on. Neither speaks. But you say something. You don't know how you know it, but your lips move. And the words fall out like you've been waiting your whole life to say them. You don't hear yourself, you feel yourself. That chill in your throat as the playback breathes through you. Then the screen fades to black. Text appears, typewriter font. No sound behind it now, just the words. You weren't the jury. You weren't the witness. You were the choir. Playback begins. When you listen, and before the video ends, the final reflection flashes on screen. Not Kelly. Not Diddy. You watching, still humming,